Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here, and I need to be completely honest with you. This is absolutely scary. Absolutely. I am actually a visual spatial learner, and so until we have a day that I could plug a cable into my mind and have it show exactly what I'm talking about on the screen, this is the biggest challenge, so bear with me. My name is Oscar Edwin Avellaneda, and about August of 2008, I was living a lifestyle that was totally unsustainable and totally upside down to who I was and how I should be operating as a person. Oh, excuse me, skipped one. I got hit by a car in August of 2008 when I was riding my bike home, and it was the realization that I needed to basically look at my life from another perspective. I learned from that accident that I should always wear a helmet, because at the time I didn't see it as anything very important. And number two, my lifestyle had to stop. I was working, volunteering, doing side gigs, and had everything else around me going on with the exception of paying attention to who I was and what my needs were. This ended with that accident, and from there, I called my sister about a few days later. By the way, I obviously lived through the accident, and it wasn't anything serious, but I called my sister who was living in Australia, and I said, Erica, I want to go back to Colombia. I'm riding my bike to Colombia. This was the dream that I had had for a while and that I did not want to honor because it was scary. It was something that I didn't know how I could do it and what was going to be the process of getting me there, but after that accident, I knew it was what I needed to do. Erica, being who she is, of course said yes. At the time, she was in Australia studying zoology, and much like our childhood, we basically always ran things off of whim, like what we felt like we could do, we would just do it. So it was me and my sister, the explorer, who went on this bike tour down to Colombia, and I started the idea for the bike tour came from a question I have had inside of me since probably about 2007 or so, where I realized that there was a conflict inside of me. And it was a conflict that came from wondering how it was that I could be raised by a working class family that instilled in me that you could do anything with hard work and a dream. And in the process of being educated, I was taught that I was part of an inferior working class. And so I wanted to find an answer to who might I have been had I stayed in Colombia. And that's where this journey started from. It was life-changing, and through the process, I basically went through kind of like peeling off layers like an onion on many different levels. See, when I grew up, I'm the oldest of three. My sister Erica is the one in the middle of the two of us there. My brother's on the far left. He would have been on the bike tour as well if it wasn't for, I just realized the time goes backwards. If it wasn't for him being enlisted in the military. So my family was a huge part of this because I wanted to go back to my roots, back to the place where I was from, and understand who it was I would have been. And it was kind of special in the sense that growing up in Anchorage, I was exposed to many things that I didn't know as a kid that were off limits. For example, my parents both worked 2 jobs as janitors when we first got here. And if anybody remembers the original Imaginarium, they had a number of cool things you could do there. And my brother and sister and I would basically play in the Imaginarium when we were young. And to me, this was me seeing the world through what my parents did. And that there wasn't any limitation there. There was nothing there that told me that my parents weren't doing anything that wasn't of value, because they were instilling in me the idea of hard work and also no matter where I am to make the most out of it. Well, and it was with this concept that me and Erica set out on the road in January of 2010 when we left Bellingham, Washington on bike. This is our original route. The blue part we actually did on the ferry. And in January, like I said, we started in Bellingham, Washington, and finished in Colombia, in Cartagena, the port town, in early September. So it was nearly 9 months of riding on the road. Excuse me. I have to stop at those ums. Okay. So as I told you, through the process of going from north to south, I went through these layers of who I was and the ideas that I had picked up along the way in life. I was challenging them, one, through the elements, what I face, and two, through just reflection in the process of ending the day or going through the accounts of what happened. One thing that is absolutely important is that a bike tour will change you. And bike tours are not necessarily for everybody, but there's something out there. There's a journey that you could set yourself on that will rewrite how you see yourself and how you see your reality. Being on a bike, we did two things right away. We looked at the things that we needed to survive in terms of food, shelter, and water, and a little extra, what we wanted for entertainment or as a hobby. And you consolidate it into 4 bags and one in front of your handlebars. And that is your life. You wake up, you eat, you enjoy what you're doing, and you basically ride. And it basically cuts out any extras in your life that you used to pay attention to. So for example, when we were going through the Northwest and getting into California, I remember when we were in San Francisco for about 2 days, we were ready to go. We were done with it. Just from Bellingham down, we had basically reached a point that we could not work in a huge city. Our lifestyle was, we had adapted ourselves to be on the road and to be away from craziness, away from traffic that goes way too fast, and also from a hectic environment where our immediate needs were always about finding food, finding our water sources, and then setting up for the next day. Okay, so this is a practice that I'm trying to continue now today, even though I'm not writing, and that's that the idea of having an artificial scarcity, something that you know you always have access to, for example, the internet on a phone. Not a necessity, but we've kind of convinced ourselves it's a necessity. And so what I try to do nowadays, and this is best practice in email because it keeps me on top of my email, is I tell myself I have 5 minutes. 5 minutes to process my emails, get back to the people I need to get back to, and then work on something else. Because it's too easy to jump into something and stay with it and not realize that there's a disconnect from the access that you think you need to something because it's always there. So this is a practice I'm trying to continue to today because that was something I learned on the bike tour that was very important. I had a false sense of reality about what I had access to because I had lived a life where I was in an urban environment pretty much my entire life, and so I thought that everything would always come to me. This is the other interesting part. When we were riding through Baja, California, we went across 2 deserts, and there was a fascinating incident that happened. My sister and I had just finished crossing through a desert. We both packed about 12 liters of water so that in the event we got caught in a sandstorm, we could actually survive bunkered down with water and plenty of food. That never happened to us, so we were okay. But when we came to this town of Rosarito, that night we had a really neat little add-on to our meal, which was that we got to eat strawberries. And the strawberries came from these 2 truckers who were basically getting rid of strawberries that were going bad in their vehicles. Now, that was mind-blowing to me because I stepped back, and I remember when I took this photo, I thought, oh my gosh, these are refrigerators on wheels. These are refrigerators on wheels that carry food north, that were handpicked by somebody down south, and now it's going to get sold at the supermarkets. And I thought to myself, no wonder I had such a false sense of reality about where my food came from, and also what it was that my body would do with food in order to translate into energy. Because at this point, we had understood that if we didn't eat healthy or if we didn't have enough to eat, we basically couldn't get through a day because when you're pedaling 6 hours a day, you have to have energy. And so it was a huge reset button to see that because I imagine myself now when I go shopping, I don't know if you do this at Costco, it's really fascinating when you look at their 20-foot ceilings of groceries. If you imagine the process that the product went through to get to the shelf, it's absolutely mind-blowing because after I had this experience, I look at bananas and I go, why aren't the bananas here? Or why don't they look right? And it's probably because they're not in season, but sometimes I still have this expectation that I should have everything I should have what I need when I want it. And it's not always going to be the case. The other interesting part was that when I was on the road, like I told you, I had this internal battle where I was trying to figure out who I was because I saw myself as a person who was valid and valuable and could contribute something, but I also had this dichotomy in my head where I wasn't one of those people that could. And so when I looked out on the road and I saw that people were harvesting food, whether it was just their job or whether they had a farm, I stopped and realized that for some reason, something happened along the way where we disconnected with what our values are. Not values in terms of like what we feel is like ethical or right, but what is our values about what we need as, what we see as important to us. So in the example, as I said earlier, if sometimes we have an impression that I need to have internet access in my pocket in order to feel like I could get something done, imagine what will happen the day you are out there and you have to go get your food. The food won't come to you, you have to go get it. And it dawned on me, I'm like, this is no wonder that we have societies out there and countries and governments that take the time to allocate funds to urban areas and not to rural areas. Because we see the places where we give more value. We tend to see more value highlighted in places that have more white-collar jobs or where you have more urban environments, that being what gets the attention. But it's actually the opposite, because when you think about it, we all have to survive, and basically in surviving, we're all at the same point. I love what Carol said about bringing food. Bringing food gets everybody together. You get everybody around food, and it's a common thing we have. The second story I have for you here comes from El Salvador. Now, I got to give you a context here about El Salvador. I was behind. We were behind, Me and Erica were behind. I had gotten bit by a dog in Mexico when I was riding with my fiancée, Laura, who's somewhere out there. And we were behind because we were trying to get to Costa Rica to be part of a research station to do our part in helping out with what had happened in the BP oil well explosion, which was, by the way, really fascinating because when you're on the road, you don't have the same access to information. So it was as if when you pulled into town, you would resurface and hear about this fury of things that is going on. But that's a totally different story. Anyways, so this story originates from El Salvador, and Central America at this point, this is July, is hot with a very intense sun and very humid. So we were starting our days at 4 a.m. We would wake up, get ready, be packed, and on the road by 5. And because we were taking malaria medication, it makes you more sensitive to UV light. So right around 11 noon, you'd start to notice blisters on your forearms, on your skin, and the skin it would be our sign for, time to pull over, have lunch, hang out till about 1 or 2, and then keep going. And this is where that story starts from. Erica and I had finished. We were pretty tired. We were annoyed. We had just left the town of La Libertad, and we had, like I said, we were going through El Salvador pretty quickly because we were on a schedule. So we basically were riding every day. We didn't allow ourselves any breaks. We finished El Salvador in 6 days, which was a challenge all on its own, but it was even more challenging after a day like this. My sister and I were coming up a hill, and I was up ahead, and there was a bridge. My sister says she heard a car coming from behind me and thought that the honking was the car honking at me because I had gotten hit. It was not the case. I came down the hill, and there was a dog in the road. The dog was still alive. It was still conscious, and just as I approached it, it tried to pick itself up, but the lower half of its body didn't work. And so it started to run around in circles with its 2 front legs, yelping and screaming. I hate these kind of things. And it wasn't the first time it's happened to me that I've had to take care of an incident like that with my own hands. And so, crying, I remember choking the dog because I wanted it to be unconscious so that when we slit its throat, it would be completely dead. And I remember Erica was crying, and I was crying, and I remember watching the fleas from the dog's neck, because this is a stray dog, creeping out between my fingers. There is something so utilitarian that is missing in all of us as people sometimes. We forget that we have the ability to both work with our minds and with our hands, but we often give more value to what our minds do. And I think what that does is it disconnects us from what our roles are. It disconnects us from our abilities to handle a situation or to stop and deal with what we may have just caused. And this was a perfect example of that incident. This incident after the dog that we killed and left on the side road, Eric and I hugged. It was wonderful to have somebody like my sister on the road with me because it meant a lot to have this support network. But that very night, we actually got to shower in the rain. And that was amazing because at this point, at the end of the day, the smell of the dog was getting to my head because I could smell it on my handlebars and smell it on everything I was touching, and it was just amazing to have that smell off my gear and off of me. But that was the other half of this, was that it's important to remember that we as individuals both have something to contribute in terms of our experiences and what we've gone through, but also in what we do with our hands. And it's very important because I feel that is what is essentially our reset button. If we work with our hands, what I've noticed, if I work with my hands, I'm a lot calmer, and I feel like I have control. So I try to run my days nowadays where I work on the computer. If I'm working on the computer and I have to be around a computer, I'll step away from the computer and I'll work with my hands. I will write, I will sketch, I will do whatever it is I need to do in order to get myself to be back present with my space and my environment. And this, to me, is the summary of what sustainable communities are. Sustainable communities, to me, is the realistic view that everything we are used to and that we have right now around us will not always be there. And that's so difficult to understand because we've built up comforts around these things. We've built up comforts around warm water or cushions on chairs. And we have to be flexible enough to adapt to these situations where we don't have that. And in some cases, set ourselves off on adventures to learn these things. But also, we have to be innovative. And this is something I truly admired about El Salvador, was when I saw this man at the gas station that same day with the dog. I saw that, and I understood why it was that I was supposed to be on the road. I needed to see accounts of other people taking on the challenges that they have and doing what they could, modifying. And I love that because that leads to innovation. And sometimes I know it is difficult. It's absolutely difficult even for me to convince myself that I could let go of some things in order to let myself enjoy something more. It's not something we're used to practicing. And when Eric and I saw this person, he sold candy basically at the gas station, and he had a bike that was modified, a wheelchair, that was modified with a bike. He had gears and everything. And I thought that was so beautiful. It was so beautiful to see that because when you're comfortable enough with who you are and what you're able to do, you could basically take anything that's thrown at you and make it the best. Thank you so much.